Hello everyone, welcome to MMBS-111, Introductory to Microbiology. This mini lecture will cover concepts that are introduced in Chapter 3, Section 1, Form and Function of Bacteria and Archaea. There are 4 learning outcomes for this mini lecture. The first is to be able to list structures all bacteria possess. The second is to name 3 structures that some, but not all, bacteria possess. Identify the major shapes of bacteria and make connections between an organism's name and its structure. So this mini lecture is really going to focus on the structure and morphology of bacteria and archaea. So if you can see here on the slide that we've got this Venn diagram that compares and contrasts prokaryotes, namely bacteria and archaea, with eukaryotes. And eukaryotes are all other cell types. So prokaryotes, or bacteria and archaea, are different from eukaryotes because they do not have a true nucleus. They have what we call a nucleoid, and this is just a general area within the cell where the genetic material can be found. Their chromosomes are circular. Typically they only possess one, but some do possess more than one. And their chromosomes do not contain histones. Histones are circular proteins that help in the arrangement and compaction of eukaryotic DNA. They do not have any membrane-bound organelles. Their cell wall is also unique. It's possessed of peptidoglycan and some other unique chemicals. And they are all single-celled. They are not any multicellular forms of prokaryotes. So eukaryotes differ because they do have a true nucleus that is surrounded by a membrane. So their genetic material is enclosed within that membrane. Their chromosomes are linear and they have many. So if you think about humans, we have 46 or 23 pairs. And those chromosomes are arranged around histones that help with the replication and compaction of eukaryotic DNA. They also possess membrane-bound organelles that are found within the cytoplasm that perform a number of cellular functions. And eukaryotes can be found in both single and multicellular forms. There are some traits that are shared by both cell types. Both prokaryotes and eukaryotes possess DNA as their genetic material. They also contain ribosomes, which function in the production of proteins. They also both possess a cell membrane to protect the cell and give it its shape. And they also include cytoplasm within that cell membrane that everything else is sort of floating around in. So let's look at the structure of the bacterial cell. There are certain structures that are found in all bacterial cells. And the first of those is the cell membrane. You can see there in red. All bacteria also possess cytoplasm that's found internally where everything else is going to sort of float in this matrix. They also possess ribosomes, and ribosomes function in the production of proteins. Bacterial cells also possess a cytoskeleton. The cytoskeleton helps to provide structure and shape for the cell. It also helps assist in the movement of substances within the cytoplasm. And all bacteria possess at least one chromosome that is circular, and some do contain more than one. Most bacteria, but not all, also possess a cell wall which can be found surrounding the plasma membrane and an external surface coating called the glycocalyx. Some bacteria also possess some other unique structures that assist them in movement, reproduction, and pathogenicity. So we're going to look at some of these structures. The first is the flagella, and you can see that in the image here. Here's a flagellum, single, and flagella are used for movement, helps the cell to get around. Also, some bacteria possess what's called a pilus or sex pili, and these appendages are used for transferring genetic material from one organism to another. Some bacteria also possess fimbriae. That's these hair-like structures on the outside, and these are used for adhesion to surfaces as well as to other cells, tissues, that kind of thing, and help that organism be able to attach to its location. Some bacteria also possess an additional outer membrane. Some have plasmids. Plasmids are circular, small pieces of DNA that can be found within the cytoplasm. And generally, plasmids contain genetic sequences or instructions for antibiotic resistance. Some bacteria also include inclusions. They're small, sort of empty sac-like structures that are used for storage. Some bacteria are also able to produce endospores, and we'll talk about them a little bit later in more detail, but endospores are really useful to an organism when environmental conditions change and they don't have access to water or nutrients, or the temperature becomes too severe, or the environment is no longer conducive to their existence. They can produce an endospore that helps to ensure their survival, and then when conditions change and improve, the organism can then sort of emerge from the endospore. Some bacteria also contain intracellular membranes, and we'll talk a little about those later. All right. So most bacteria function independently. They are single-celled organisms. They are able to function independently of other cells as a unicellular organism. Some bacteria do act and function together in groups or as colonies or biofilms, and we will get into biofilms a little more in depth later on. Through biofilms, organisms are able to better colonize certain environments and communicate with each other. Bacteria typically, on average, are in the 1 micron size, so they are incredibly small. Bacteria that are coccus-shaped, their circumference tends to be about 1 micron, sometimes less, sometimes a little bit more. Rods generally have a width of 1 micron, but their length can be up to 2 microns. And there is some pleomorphism that is expected within the same species of organisms, and that's due to any genetic differences or nutritional differences. And pleomorphism just means that there's a variation in size and shape of the cells of that species. So these are the typical bacterial shapes. So when we say coccus, we mean round. The organism or bacterium is circular. A bacillus bacterium is rod-shaped, and Vibrio bacteria have this curved rod shape. It tends to look kind of like a comma. Coccobacillus is sort of a cross between the coccus and bacillus. It's a short, fat rod. The spirillum are spiral-shaped bacteria, and they are very rigid. The spiral tends to be somewhat fatter than a similar shape, the spirochete, which is very sort of helical, or spring-like. Organisms, bacterial organisms, not only have typical shapes, but they also tend to have general arrangements as well. And many organism names come from their shape and arrangement when they divide. So an organism that divides in half and remains connected after that division is considered a diplococci. And you can see examples right here. This is Klebsiella, and you can see diplococci tend to have this capsule that surrounds the outside that you can see here when it's stained. Organisms that, when they divide, remain connected together in a chain are called streptococci. You can see them here, these chain arrangements. Cocci that divide in two planes and form groups of 4, like you see here, are called tetrads. Sarcina are cocci bacteria that divide in 3 planes and form these cube shapes. And these are generally arrangements anywhere from 8 to 64, as you can see here. And then finally, the staphylococci divide in multiple planes, and they remain together in these clusters or groups that look like bunches of grapes, as you can see here. Okay. Bacilli also can have differing arrangements, not quite as many as the cocci. Many bacilli are found just as a single bacillus. Here they divide and then they separate. Bacilli that remain connected after division in pairs are called diplococci, as you can see right here. And you can tell that there are 2 separate organisms that are connected at the end. Okay. Streptobacilli form chains, so they remain connected after division in these long chains. And then finally, we have the palisades. And the palisades arrangement is kind of like a picket fence. Sometimes we have these V shapes, or what other scientists refer to as Chinese characters, where they are connected on the sides of the cell instead of at the ends. All right, so that is the end of 3.1. Make sure that you quiz yourself on these questions so that you have a good understanding of common structures found in bacteria, the different arrangements and shapes of bacteria, and then how an organism's name refers or is connected to its shape or arrangement. And I hope that this video was helpful.